Good morning, everyone, and it is such a pleasure to be home. And Jim, thanks so much for your kind introduction. It's like I choreograph a different dance now at Queen's Park. And it takes a lot of creativity to get movement there too sometimes. But ladies and gentlemen, this is so important to be here this morning because we're celebrating who we are. And Peter talked about the importance of resiliency, and in rural Ontario in particular. And I have to tell you, it all starts right here. It starts with our elders who want to pass along their pride and conviction of maintaining our communities. It comes through our parents, and it's got to settle into our students as well. And I'm so glad the organizing committee had the foresight to make an opportunity, a forum for young people to come together, because someday we're going to be passing the torch on to you. In fact, in some cases we have already. You know, Jim has his own way of instilling pride in community. He was talking to John Stackhouse downstairs about a unique initiative that they did in Central Huron, and I'm going to share it on your behalf. In terms of pride of community, Jim was talking about they redid a park in Clinton, and they had the young people involved in refurbishing that park. And he said, now it's theirs, and it's like nothing's going to happen to their park, and they're protecting it in a certain way as well. And I share that with you because that's what we have to do in rural Ontario as well. We have to have conviction to make sure that we have the supports, we have the channels to exercise our voice, and we have opportunity to grow. And that's why events like this, R2R, rural to rural, is so important. Because guess what? There are people, through no fault of their own, that just don't get rural Ontario. I've lived it. And, you know, it's interesting. When I was first appointed Minister of Education, one of the first persons I heard from was former Premier Bill Davis. And since then, we've been growing this relationship. I was just with him at an event last night that caused me to get home around 2 o'clock this morning. And he is just such a spark plug yet, and he cares so much. Bill was introduced last night, Premier Davis, I should say, pardon me, was introduced last night by Steve Pagan as probably the best education minister in Ontario. And nobody has touched him since he had the vision and the heart to ensure that young people matter, and they need to be ensured that their path to success is formulated on realities. And those realities are, what are the needs of today? Where are we going to go in the future? Where is the prosperity? And I go back to people questioning rural Ontario. Some people might suggest that there was an idealism that was driving people to think, well, for Ontario or any province to grow forward, people just need to live in the cities. You know, corporate farming will take over and people just need to move to urban centers and all will be well. Well, with all due respect, I remember being in Hungary back in the early 2000s, and my husband and I were driving around. My husband works for West Cast Industries, and this is a rural success story unto itself. People, I'm sure, are aware of West Cast Industries in Wingham. Very important job provider. And he works in product launch. And for 3 years, he spent 3 weeks in Hungary, 1 week back home. And he was helping build a plant in their industrial vein, just southwest of Budapest. And it's such an amazing opportunity to share specialties from Ontario with a country that was trying to reinvent itself and with its economy. But one time we were driving around the countryside, and I'm going, Dennis, there's something different about this landscape. There's just something that's not the same as Ontario as we know it. And it hit me maybe 3 days into being over there visiting with him. There were no buildings in the countryside. All the barns were gone, all the houses were gone, and essentially that whole essence of what we're so proud to call rural Ontario was missing from that community. And I hope with everything in me that as we look through and ahead into the 21st century, we keep working hard to make sure that we don't lose our buildings on the side roads. We don't lose our houses, because we can, anywhere, and I'll touch on something, I just thought something else, from anywhere now with technology, we can drive prosperity. And part of my role, part of my mandate, if you will, being Minister of Education, is demonstrating why rural Ontario matters, and demonstrating how we can make a difference from a village of 1,000 to a village of 300 to a town of 10,000 and beyond. And I think we have to make sure that it's an onus on my generation to make sure that for the young people who are here today, we work hard to understand what matters to you and where we need to be going in terms of job provisions so you can carry on the torch. And it's so, so important. For years now, I have had colleagues and friends that concur that in order for our province of Ontario to move forward, we need a vibrant and successful urban Ontario, but for goodness sakes, we also need a thriving and prosperous rural Ontario as well. Rural Ontario has to be at the table, and I take that job really, really seriously as I sit on the Treasury Board. The Treasury Board consists of 9 ministers, and we're responsible for the purse strings of the province. And every day, I put a rural lens on every expenditure and every decision that gets made, because more than once, and people are used to me saying it now, and it's only been 14 days, well, where does rural fit into this? And in fact, the Premier applauds me for that. And we have to keep speaking up for rural and not be ashamed, not be embarrassed, not hide behind a social Twitter icon or meme. We have to stand proudly, put our faces and names to what's being said out there. I really feel really strongly about this, and I'll tell you why. When I was first appointed Minister of Education, you know what I mean when I say Twitter trolls, right? There were a lot of Twitter trolls saying, she lives on a farm, what the heck does she know about education? And then it got to be a game. I have a lot of game in me because, first and foremost, I'm proud to call rural Ontario home. And so every once in a while, I'm letting you in on a secret, I'll tweet something just to see, oh, I wonder what the Twitter trolls will have to say about this. And one time I got home and I wanted to catch up with my husband, who was doing something in the back of our barn. And I flew through, and all of a sudden there was a little nest of the cutest kittens ever. So I stopped, took a picture, and I went, I wonder what they can say about this. And honestly, there were people that just jumped on it immediately. They post a caricature or just that egghead. They hide behind social media, and just to drill down on why rural Ontario doesn't matter. And that just sparks up my fire inside me, and it wants me to work harder and prouder and let people know the amazing things that are happening. And let me tell you, there are amazing things going to be happening in education so that people across this province, be it in Northern Ontario, Van Cleek Hill, Windsor, or right here in Blythe, there's going to be opportunities for young people to be driving our economy forward, because that's what it's all about. Somebody in this room will smile when I say every issue that we face, no matter how old we are, is an economic issue. Whether you're 9 years old and you're looking in your wallet, seeing how much you've earned for an allowance and thinking about what kind of fishing lure you would like to buy, because this little 9-year-old that I know likes to leave money in his wallet, so that's fascinating unto itself, through to how you're going to buy a vehicle, how you're going to pay for your schooling, right through to purchasing your first home and setting down your roots so that you can help pass on the torch to the next generation of rural Ontario. And so what are we doing from a Ministry of Education perspective? We've hit the pause button, and I am not going to apologize to anyone for hitting the pause button, because as Bill Davis reminded me last night, he said, look at all these kids in this room. They're all yours. I was like, oh, thanks. My shoulders just sank a little bit with the weight. But that said, I fully know what he means. He goes, you have an opportunity to change how we educate our students for the jobs of tomorrow. This gentleman is 89 and a half years old. He gets it. So we have embarked, in fact, we're kicking off our second phase of the consultation at noon today. We are working on an opportunity for everyone to have their voice heard on things that matter, so that we can prepare our young people not only to keep driving our economy, but know they have the skills for the jobs that will keep rural Ontario, rural Canada, and rural communities around the world vibrant, so we can be at the table with our urban partners as well. And we need to make sure that we're focused in on the skills that are required. We know we need to take a step back and hear from people on how we can best prepare our young people with skills like math, embracing technology. You know, I have a family that lives in, my sister and her family live in Kuwait. My youngest niece, she started coding in kindergarten. You know, around the world, the Ontario education system, and I'm proud to say, is incredibly well respected. But other jurisdictions are catching up, and in some instances, they're passing us. When 4 and 5-year-olds are learning the essence, just a very preliminary, cursory concept of coding, and we're not there yet in Ontario, and so we need to pick up our socks. The former Premier of Education reminded me we have a huge opportunity and we can't be afraid of change. We need to have confidence that we can make a difference. We need to have, and actually I'm going to use somebody's remarks that you'll probably hear about in a few minutes. We need to have everybody at the table. It's just not government's responsibility to make sure we're on track. It's our businesses, and it's an engaged citizenship. You know, part of the consultation that I'm embarking on is making sure that we get parents engaged. For too long, I'll say, it's been somebody else's responsibility to do things. So when we embarked on the consultation I'm facilitating, we called it For the Parents, because we want to hear their voice, but we want to hear teachers' voice. We want to hear students' voices. We want to hear municipal leaders' voices. We want to hear what we need to, we want to hear from everyone in terms of how we can best be preparing our students for the jobs and the futures and our communities of tomorrow. But we also want to ensure that as we're corresponding and talking, that we don't rule too quickly abstract ideas out of the picture. And that's why these forums are so important as well. So I invite everybody, go to the website fortheparents.ca to contribute your thoughts. Because on the back end of it, I want to make sure that parents know we're inviting them to be engaged as well. We're inviting them to stand up and say, we know things have to change, we know the jobs of tomorrow are different, and we care that our students are getting the best skills they need for a prosperous future. So I'm excited about this role, ladies and gentlemen. I'm excited to demonstrate that somebody from rural Ontario can have the foresight, the conviction, and a lot of good old-fashioned stubbornness to manage the waters ahead of us so that we get it right for all of you. And we get it right for your families, and we get it right for the next generation. And that's where being resilient is so important. And to me, resilient means, and I leave this with you, everybody needs to be proud to call rural Ontario home. Everybody needs to be committed to making sure that we think outside of the boxes and you take a risk. I managed a dairy cooperative before going to Queen's Park. When you think about taking a risk, you need to do your homework, you need to develop a business case, you need to develop the value prop, meaning what's the return on the investment. You have to weigh the risks, and then by all means, if it balances out, I'm looking at Alison Law right now, as she would concur, if it balances out, the checks and balances are there, jump into it. Sometimes things don't work out, and you learn from it, but keep jumping from that point in which you've learned a lesson, because we need you to. And so I congratulate the organizing committee for hosting our young people here today. I look forward to the panel. I look forward to our experts coming up and talking to us about the skills we need. I'll be taking my own notes, and feeding it into the consultation process that we have going on. And for goodness sakes, if anything, being resilient, I repeat myself one more time, means being very proud to be from rural Ontario. And people are watching us. I was in Edmonton last week, and in a nonpartisan way, my colleague in Edmonton said, Lisa, on Wednesday morning, you need to get over to the legislature because they're releasing the new curriculum for K-4. My colleague from Manitoba said, we're watching what's happening in Ontario because they're embarking on reviewing their curriculum. And jurisdictions around the world are hitting the pause button to make sure that we evolve with the needs of our young people. So thank you very much for allowing me a chance to share a few thoughts that I've had acquired over the last 113 days. And by all means, our doors are always open. My office is just across the street, and you can find my number on the website. Stay in touch and be engaged. Be engaged is the biggest thing. If something's not working in your school, speak up. If something needs to be done differently on a sports team you're involved in or in your community, speak up. The best, most powerful tool you have in the spirit of being resilient is your voice. Have a good day, everyone.